Hello, dear children. Today I'm going to speak to you about the Pope's poem, An Essay on Man. Now, you all know that Alexander Pope, he was a poet of the 18th century. And 18th century was known as the classical age or even Augustan age. And why it was known as the classical age? Simply because that was the time of, or rather, you can say it was the age of science. It was the coming of science that had created a question mark in the minds of the people. People were usually, their main occupation was agriculture. So there were many farmers and they were used to work in the fields. But with the coming of science, industrialization began. And with the coming of industries, naturally, you will understand that everybody wanted to come to the urban area and in order to get an employment or rather a day-to-day employment. Everybody wanted. So naturally, people started migrating from the rural areas to the urban areas. And with the coming of science, naturally, people started giving more and more importance to reasoning. That is, everything was based on facts. Because what is science? Science is based on factual knowledge. Now, this Alexander Pope, as you all know, was born to a Catholic family in London on May 21st, 1688. And because of his Catholic loyalties, he was debarred from enjoying the rights and privileges, in fact, even going to the university. And at the age of 12, you can say, he was, or rather, from the age of 12, Pope was chiefly self taught. Matlab, he started learning on his own, and he himself had stated in one of his works that he dipped into English, French, Italian, Greek, Latin poets. But what, or rather, who had a profoundest influence on the life of Alexander Pope, that was Roman poets. He was a very small man, 4 feet tall, and he was very delicate and a little deformed also. And he was misshapen simply because of his tubercular ailment. He later on rented a villa in Twickenham near London, where he spent the rest of his life till his death in 1744. Alexander Pope was also a great admirer of Dryden, and especially his use of the heroic couplets. And this form of poetry, heroic couplet, was used by Chaucer, Geoffrey Chaucer, in the 14th century. But it was marveled by John Dryden, and later on, Pope had also used this particular form of poetry, heroic couplet. This is a two-line stanza which rhymes in its own self and has a sense complete. And because of the use of this heroic couplet, he has been able to rise in his works and in his poems. And especially his aim was to achieve perfection. And it's not only that he used the stanza, but he pruned and chiseled all its irregular forms. And in his hands, heroic couplet, you can say, became a precise and a valuable instrument of narrative in his works. Now, if we come back to the poem, An Essay on Man, this is taken from Epistle 2 of Nature and the State of Man. Now, he has written this whole poem, Essay on Man, in 4 epistles. Epistle 1 speaks of man with respect to the universe. Epistle 2 focuses on the man himself. Epistle 3 focuses on man in society. And Epistle 4 on man and his aim for happiness. Together, this whole poem comprises a document which is central to the understanding of the Augustan age. And the essence of this epistle too lies in the second line, which is, Know then thyself, presume not God to scan. Now, this is a very, very important. In fact, you can say this very line has become a maxim or a proverb, because it is man himself, rather it is within man himself, that there is a balance which makes for an order between the two principles of self love and reason. And you can imagine that man, in his vanity, thinks that he is the Lord of the universe, that he has knowledge of everything. But the most important thing which the poet tells, or which Alexander Pope tells in this particular poem, is that he must learn to find out a link in this great change of the universe, or in great change of God's impartial order, and realize that he is only a partial link, a viable link between the universe, between God and his particular material universe. So the very first line, when it states, "Know then thyself, presume not God to scan, the proper study of mankind is man." So, Alexander Pope is asking you to look into thy own self, pierce and see what is within you. Because the proper study, that means you think you are a man of reasoning, having reasoning. But with reasoning, can you master your body? Can you master your mind? Or can you master the universe? First of all, try to look within, because the proper study of mankind is man. So this is rather a whole poem is a philosophical poem, and this whole poem is in a way addressed to his friend Lord Bolingbroke, and this poem exhibits a great deal of conviction, which is, you can say, a conviction which is deeply representative of the thought and the feeling of that particular time. Now he says, what is man? Where is he man? Where he stands? He says he is placed on this isthmus of a middle state, a being who is darkly wise and rudely great, with too much knowledge for the skeptic side, which too much weakness for the stoic's prize. Now he says, this man who is, he says, darkly wise. Now see the two opposites, darkly wise. I mean, he's calling man wise also because of the reason that he has, but darkly because he does not have the real knowledge. He does not know anything about the world. He is not able to scan the truth about the universe. And therefore, because of his ignorance, you can also say, he thinks himself to be rudely great. That is, man, because of his passions, because of his weaknesses, because of his vanity, he says, he thinks himself, he develops this habit of arrogance, rudeness, abhorrence for the world, because he's turbulently very rough. And why he is rough? Because he has too much knowledge on the skeptic side. And skeptic side, that means all the time you because you are not aware of the truth of life, naturally you are in a state of doubt every time. I mean, you cannot ascertain any things because of the confusion that is there in your mind. And on the other hand, too much weakness on the stoic sides. And stoics, that is a person who has a mastery of all passions. So you do not, man himself does not know about the world and about his own reasonings, and he does not have knowledge about his own self. But he thinks, he takes pride because he has no, because of the dearth of knowledge, you can say, and he is very skeptic. And on the other hand, it shows man's limitations also, because he is mastered by all his passions. So he hangs in between, in doubt to act or rest, in doubt to deem himself a god or beast. So he hangs in between. That means, because he does not have a proper knowledge of the ethical side, the divinely side, the God who is the creator and the master of the universe. And at the same time, because he does not have knowledge about his own self, so he says that he is hanging in between, in doubt to act or rest, whether to take a decision or whether to relax. That is, it is a contrast between the Stoic side on the one hand and the Epicurean, the hedonistic philosophy on the other hand. And in doubt, his mind or body to prefer, that is, whether to look into his reasoning, whether to look into his knowledge, or whether he is skeptical about his material wealth. Born but to die, and reasoning but to err. And each individual, we are all subject to birth and death in life. We are all human beings. So we are not infinite, we are finite. We are not eternal like God. So, our limitation, we are just players, mere players who come here on this stage of life, this earth that is the stage of life. We act our parts and then we are heard no more, as Shakespeare said. So, we are born but to die. We play our parts and we die. And reasoning but to err. That is, we do exercise our mind to put our knowledge, to put our reasoning. But every time we tend to falter. Why we falter? Why we err? Because we do not have the correct knowledge. And alike in ignorance, his reason such, whether he thinks too little or too much. So, alike in reasoning, that is, each individual, he says, in fact, the whole poem is a satire on the vanity of nobility. That is, we all, tend to think that we know too much, or rather we can master the world, we can do things with the help of our reason, but we are alike in ignorance also and in reasoning also. That is, sometimes when people say that ignorance is bliss, because sometimes when you are not aware of things in life and when you are not clear headed, in fact it says that one should refrain from showing one's knowledge, and one should rather limit oneself to one's own ignorance. But man, whether he thinks too little or whether he thinks too much, he creates that chaos of, in his mind, there is a chaos of thought and passion. Thought, reasoning, passion, that is his instincts, his feelings, his sensitivity. And because of all that, he is totally confused. He's all confused and still by himself abused or disabused. That is, either he is himself abused or deceived by his own knowledge, created half to rise and half to fall. And because of the lack of knowledge, because of the clear, the clear facts that should be there in his mind, because he's not clear in his knowledge, naturally he does not retain that zenith of height of knowledge, and in fact he's half to rise and half to fall. Great Lord of all things, yet a prey to all. That is because of his reasoning. He thinks himself to be all knowledgeable, but yet he is subject to his own limitations. And sole judge of truth, in endless error hurled, the glory, jest, and the riddle of the world. Sole judge of truth. That is, if we look inside our own selves, then we are able to discern the true knowledge, the true truth. Look into the inner being, have an insight, have a conviction and a faith regarding your own knowledge. And if you are having that, then you are able to achieve the glory and solve all the riddles of the world. That is, all the puzzles, all the confusions, all the chaos that is lying before you, it might be resolved. So, Pope says, go wondrous creature. Who is the wondrous creature? Man. Man is the wondrous creature. Wondrous creature. He says, mount where science guides. So don't go by your own thinking. Don't go by your passions, but what science tells you. Go by facts and go measure earth, weigh air, and state the tides. Instruct the planets in what orbs. That means, I mean, if you are able to have proper knowledge, you can even instruct in what the different orbits in which the planets move. You can weigh air, you can measure earth, you can do all the things which science guides you to do. And at the same time, you can correct old time, and regulate the sun. But how can you do that? You are not running this sun, or rather the time of the world, which is run by God. It is God who regulates the time, and it is God who regulates the different seasons. And how can you question, or how can you have doubt upon that great epitome of life and the great ethereal God, who is the exact ruler of life? So he says, go soar with Plato to the imperial sphere, to the first good, first perfect, and first fair, or tread the mazy round his followers trod, and quitting sense, call imitating God, as Eastern priests in giddy circles run and turn their heads to imitate the sun. And here Pope is also ridiculing the Oriental forms of worship, as people usually do. And they try to imitate God, and they try to establish the universality of God. But at the same time, he is telling us that we cannot question the universality of God, and we cannot question the spiritual God who is there and who is running the universe. But at the same time, we must have a reason. We must exercise our minds in order to reason. And therefore, he, in the end, tells us that go teach eternal wisdom how to rule, then drop into thyself and be a fool. Now, see the last lines he says. He says, teach eternal wisdom, that is, teach about God, about the ethereal presence of the spiritual divine being, he says. Then and then only you will know how to rule the world, and at the same time, you should be able to know your own limitations. When he says that drop into thyself and be a fool, by fool he means that man should know his own limitations, and he should come back to his self and accept the fact that I am only a human being and I'm bound in by my limitations. So you can say that this traditional construct, or you can say the characteristics of the Middle Ages and the Renaissance, of the great chain of being, according to which man occupies a position between the God and the inert matter, is combined with the Newtonian science of Pope's own day, emphasizing and exploring man's self awareness and understanding and his position in society. And the object of the poem is surely to justify the ways of God to man, and to prove that the scheme of the universe is the best of all possible schemes in spite of evil appearances, and that our failure to see the perfection of the whole is due to our limited vision. Why we are not able to see the perfection of this whole universe. So, glory be to God. We should scan Him first. We should know Him first, and then thyself. And at the same time, we should be confined to our own limitations. We should not try to soar high and try to guide the universe, which actually is done by our divine being. I hope you have been able to understand the poem. And this is just the part that is prescribed in your course, taken from the Epistle 2. It's a very long one. But at the same time, this is trying to, it's only, you can say, a small part which is trying to guide you and tell you that look into thy own self first, and then try to understand the world. And with this, I just want to quote some line from Pope when he says that reason, passion answer one great aim, that true self love and social are the same, that virtue only makes our bliss below, and all our knowledge is ourselves to know. So that is more important. All our knowledge is ourselves to know. That is the proper study of mankind is man. With it, thank you.